This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, here it is. I'm Andy Gutierrez once again, and I'm continuing the series on effective communication. So anyhow, that first slide, we always have this great first slide. I don't get it. I don't get it. What are you talking about? Yes, because most of the time when we talk, a lot of people don't know what we're talking about. We get the wrong information out, and it affects us in our personal lives as much as it affects us big time in our business life. So it's something that we should be looking forward to, looking into and finding out how to have effective communication. This is awfully important for generations X, Y, and Z to have effective communication because they were brought up more in the technology area, especially Y and Z, where we communicate more, technologically rather than face to face. And face to face definitely is the best way to communicate. So when we're looking at this little thing over here, we're looking at this effective communication. We get the next thing over here. Effective communication requires more than an exchange of information. Yeah, it's more than just, talking to somebody. It's more than that. Effective communication is much more than that. When done right, communication fosters understanding. You know what the other person's talking about. Yeah, and that's what we're missing today. People don't fully understand what the other person is talking about. I call this pre-2015 and post-2015 syndrome. Now, we've got the understanding. It strengthens relationships because you understand what you're talking about. It improves teamwork because now when somebody does something on your team at work, it's the thing that you asked them to do or the thing they said they were going to do. There's no assumptions anymore. When we assume, of course, we make mistakes. And of course, it builds trust. All this effective communication, look what it does for you. Understanding better, strengthens relationships, improves teamwork, and it improves trust. It builds trust that every good leader wants to have. Now, when we look at this, we ask the big question, well, what the heck is communication? Everybody talks these words, they talk in generalities, but they don't know what sometimes they're talking about. So therefore, communication, we say, well, that's just talking to somebody. I wave to somebody, whatever it may be. No, 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 no. Most people say that communication is the transfer of thoughts and ideas between two or more people. I say two or more people because unless you're like me and I travel by myself a lot, I talk to myself. And sometimes I lose those conversations. But in all seriousness, this is what people think communication is. Just a transfer of thoughts or ideas between two or more people. The bad thing here is that people assume they know what they're talking about, and they don't. So we want to look at effective communication. Effective communication. Now, what is that? Now, effective communication is the transfer of thoughts or ideas between two or more people that all participants understand and remember. Yes, understand and remember. So when we talk about effective communication, we're talking about understanding and remembering what was said or what was seen. All right. So when we look into this a little bit further, we look at the components of effective communication. Now you say components. Come on. We're just talking here. We're just talking. No, there's a lot of components that go into today's communication. This is the first time that in the business world, there are 4 to 5 generations working at one time. And guess what? They communicate differently. Some words that we say mean different things, and it's English, and people don't get it. So yes, there are different communications here. You're going to see 10 different components for effective communication, and in future video events like we're doing today, we're going to discuss each one of these 10 until you're really good at it, and then we have effective communication. So first of all, we have to have attentive listening. That's a big thing, and I say attentive listening. This is not just hear something, because when you hear something, you don't listen, you don't process that information. So attentive listening, we'll talk about that today. Personalities, everybody's got a personality, and what they have done now, the experts have seen that there are 16 basic types of personalities. And if you know those different personalities, you can make it easier for you to say, okay, that person over here is kind of, he's kind of to the point, right? Doesn't laugh that much. That's his personality. So when I talk with that person, when I communicate with that person, I don't expect to get a big laugh back in my face, So this is going to help us understand who we're talking to. Here's one, moods. Moods. When we're talking to people, we want to get understanding. Yeah. And we want to get remembering. But sometimes people are in moods. Now, that's not good moods and bad moods. No. You're going to find out that in this mood area, which has been researched by, once again, the experts, we're going to find out that we have pleasant and unpleasant. Yeah, that's true. We have that. But we also have things that are going to make us motivated to do something, action, and we're going to be in moods that will not have any action to it. So we're going to look at that too. Next thing we're going to look at is the generation gap. Like I said before, we got 4 or 5 different generations working together. Some of them really, they talk badly about one another. We've all heard of the younger troops saying okay to a baby boomer, okay, boomer. All right, that's what they say to us when they've had enough of us. And when they have enough of the Generation X, watch out, because Y and Z, they call you Karens. And they say, oh, Karen, there's another Karen act over here, because they're sick and tired of being called millennials, because they know what that means too. So we're going to be talking into that as well. We're going to talk about ethnicity, communicating. All these things they all affect. So ethnicity, we're a melting pot of people out here. English is not the #1 language. So what are we going to do over here to make sure there's understanding and there's remembering? We got to look at that. Education, yeah. Everybody out there is not high school education, believe it or not. Some haven't got a nice high school education. Other people are not all college educated people. But we have to talk to people in different ways in order for them to pay attention to what we're saying to them and understanding what we're saying to them. All right. We have written ways to communicate, right? We have emails, we have text, we have Instagram, we have different things, even writing a letter maybe, all right? But we have different ways to communicate with these people. Of course, we have verbal, and believe it or not, verbal has tone, and different tones mean different things. So we have to know that. That all goes into effective communication. Then, of course, we have nonverbal, which is the body. And the body gives off 66% of every conversation is the body. It means more than words. It gives meaning to words. But how much do you know about it? Not too much. It gives off 54,000 different phrases, by the way, in case you didn't know. And then finally, we have a memory process, and I doubt that a lot of people understand that as well. Okay, so now we're going to take a look over here at the first one that we were talking about, which is attentive listening. Now you can see the 3 pictures over here. They portray the 3 different types of attentive listening. So as we dig into this, we're going to look at what is very important. You've got to remember this. Remember this when you're talking with people. Please remember this. The quantity, and also when you're writing to people in emails and stuff like that, the quantity of information is controlled by the capacity of the brain to process that information. Now, that's a very important thing. Many times we talk to people, we give them a ton of information, and we don't understand why they don't remember it. Well, the reason is this. Your brain up here, it's a great, great computer. Yes, it is. However, it doesn't process information as fast as the computer that I'm talking into right now. Doesn't do that. All right. You can't fill up this whole screen with pressing down that X key and fill it all up and say, okay, I want to remember that. That's not the way that the brain works. It has capacities as to how much it processes. It doesn't process everything. So when we get further on down in that memory process, you're going to find out that things have to be personal and meaningful in order for the brain even to process that information. And by process, I mean that it looks at it, decides whether or not it's going to go to a short-term memory, might go to working memory, might go to long-term memory, might not go to any memory, just might be forgotten. All right. But that's an important thing to know. Remember, the quantity of information is controlled by the capacity of the brain to process that information. Now that gets into our attentive listening process. Now we know there are 3 different attentive listening spots, but we do know also that what is on the screen is very, very important, because this is the way we're supposed to conduct ourselves in talking with people, conversing with people. It's not just talking to people. People talk at people, but we want to converse with people. That way we understand better what's going on. So number 1 is to listen. Don't make up your mind what you're going to say next. Listen to what the person is saying to you. Listen. Don't hear. Listen. Process that information. Now, while you're processing the information, you should be thinking, okay, thinking about what that person is saying to you and thinking about what you're going to say back. And then once you got your thought processes right, then you can speak. All right? So just don't start, okay, breaking into conversations. No, 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 no. That's not for effective communication. That's not going to happen. You have to go through the process. Listen to what the person is saying to you. Process that information. Think about that information. Think about what you're going to say to that information, and then finally speak. All right? So the 3 types of attentive listening is this. Number 1 is called controlled attention. Now think about this, controlled attention. You've been there, and when you're listening to people, not trying to listen to the TV set and listen to something else, but when you're listening to people, you should have complete concentration to what is heard and or seen. That's what you should be doing with controlled attention. You've been there, you've been in the zone. Yeah, that's when you're so deeply involved that you don't hear anything else. You're just listening to that person or listening to that program, and you are processing all the information. You don't hear anything else. People walk up next to you and they scare the daylights out of you because you're in a zone, right? Second type of attentive listening is called stimuli attention. Now this is focusing on more than one situation at the same moment. In other words, dual tasking. Now, do we have listening skills like this? Sure we do. When you drive your car, sometimes you're driving your car and you're talking on a cell phone. Now, when you're doing that, you're not giving one thing 100% of your attention like you do under controlled attention. You're going to miss something. That's what they tell you. You know, don't text and drive because you're going to get in an accident, and then you will get into an accident. Here's a little thing for you. When you're talking on the phone, you're thinking about what you're going to say next, just like we had in the previous slide. So when you're driving your car, you're not giving 100% to the road. Part of your thought process over here is saying, okay, what am I going to say next on the phone? Believe it or not, that slows up your reaction time by 1.5 seconds, which makes you legally impaired. So think about that the next time you're driving and talking on the phone. Okay, and then finally, we have arousal attention. Now, this is the worst type of attention you possibly can have. This is when it stimulate the brain to refocus on what is heard and or seen. Yeah, refocus. And in other words, in arousal attention, your mind is daydreamed. It's gone off somewhere. And now all of a sudden something has to happen to you to refocus you, to bring you back into the conversation, hopefully to get you back into the controlled attention. All right, now the process for memory, I'll leave you with this. Process of memory, you get information given to you. It's called sensory memory. You'll forget some of those things you think the brain thinks is important to go on, so it's transferred, okay? And then you rehearse that. Rehearsing that only means that you're going to talk about it. And when you talk about it, you figure out whether or not it's personal and meaningful to you, the brain does. And it might put it into short-term memory. Or it might just say, okay, it's not worth for remembering. And then the process goes further. It can be transferred into working memory and or long-term memory. And so that's the process that we want to get into, the process that we've got here. Very short clip for you today. Remember some of it, read through it again. I'm not going to make these long. You should be reading through it because these are the steps to effective communication that's going to give you understanding and remembrance, okay? So let's get away from this. Let's get away from, I don't get it. When did you tell me that one? I just don't get it, okay? Thank you very much. See you next time around.